Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs and another edition of Anniversary Albums. Today we're going to be looking at albums that are having a significant anniversary in the month of December 2023. December's always a bit of a hard month because there aren't as many releases in December as there are in other months of the year, because most of the Christmas releases are out in November, so that there's time for the Christmas buying public to get their hands on them. But I've still managed to come up with 10 albums that we're going to have a look at today. The first one we're going to have a look at is having its 55th anniversary in the month of December. It was originally released on the 2nd of December 1968. I only have this one on CD, unfortunately, but it's a great album nonetheless. And that is Cruisin' with Ruben and the Jets by the Mothers of Invention. This, of course, with the lovely picture of a very young Frank Zappa on the back there. This, of course, was the Mothers of Invention's sort of doo-wop project. Doo-wop was a music that Frank Zappa had loved since he was a child, and they did an album of exclusively doo-wop music. Ray Collins, the original lead singer of the Mothers of Invention, was kind of on the way out the door when they recorded this, but he makes a solid appearance on this. He sings lead vocal on a lot of these tracks. It's a wonderful album. It's in sort of varying parts. It's delightful and hilarious, and as you would expect from a Frank Zappa doo-wop project, I think. I mean, you've got things like Cheap Thrills and How Could I Be Such a Fool, which was actually a track that they'd already done. I'm Not Satisfied, Jelly Roll Gumdrop, Later That Night, Fountain of Love, No, No, No. Anyway, The Wind Blows is another sort of song that had already been in the Mothers of Invention catalogue before this album. It's a great album. It's well worth checking out. It's a lot of fun. It's something a bit different in the Zappa catalogue too, which I think is great. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 40th anniversary in the month of December. It was originally released on the 2nd of December 1983, in the UK, that is. There's a possibility that it had a different release date in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. But I'm going with the UK release date on this. It is the rather wonderful Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne. Maybe not quite up to the quality of those first two Ozzy albums, but this is still a really good album. This, of course, rather controversially also is the one where the other songwriters were kind of coaxed into signing away their songwriting credits, so that all the songs are credited as being written solely by Ozzy, which of course is something he never did in his career. He was never a fully fledged songwriter of sort of music and lyrics. But it's still a really good album. You've got Jakey Lee on guitar, you've got Bob Daisley on bass, Don Airey on keyboards, and Tommy Aldridge on drums. It's a good lineup. You've got the wonderful title track, you've got Now You See It, Now You Don't, You're No Different, Rock and Roll Rebel, Waiting for Darkness is a really good song, Slow Down, So Tight. There are slightly different track listings for this around the world too. This is the track listing that I have on my copy. This is an Australian pressing, so yeah, it's a really good album though. I think it's well worth anybody's time if you're into Ozzy, into Black Sabbath, that sort of thing. It's a really good album. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 50th anniversary in the month of December. It was originally released on the 5th of December 1973. I think most people would agree that this is an all-time classic and one of the best records by this artist. It is Band on the Run by Paul McCartney and Wings. This was sort of his critical comeback. His first few albums after the Beatles got absolutely slammed by the music press, by the critics. I think unfairly so, especially with albums like McCartney and Ram and Wings Wildlife, which the wonderful Davy Gallagher and I did an In Defense of on. I'll leave a link to that in the description. But this is a wonderful album, and it was the one that the critics said, Mac is back. And I mean, it's hard to argue when you've got songs like Band on the Run and Jet and Bluebird, wonderful songs. Let Me Roll It is a wonderful song, Mrs. Vanderbilt. My version has Helen Wheels on it, which wasn't on the original UK version. It was a standalone single in the UK. But you've got the lovely Mamounia and No Words. You've got the great Picasso's Last Words, Drink to Me. Love that song. And then the incredible album closer, 1985. It is a great album. I've done a Paul McCartney studio albums ranked top 10. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. This ranked pretty highly, as you would expect. So check that out if you haven't already. The next album I'm going to have a look at is another Stone Cold classic album. It's celebrating its 55th anniversary in the month of December. It was originally released on the 6th of December 1968, and it is Beggars Banquet by the Rolling Stones. Now, I recently did a Rolling Stones studio albums ranked of their 60s albums with the wonderful Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation. I'll leave a link to that in the description. As you can imagine, for both of us, this album ranked pretty darn highly. I mean, it's got Sympathy for the Devil, you know. It's got No Expectations, Dear Doctor, Parachute Woman, Street Fighting Man. I mean, Side A opens with Sympathy for the Devil. Side B opens with Street Fighting Man. You can't really do much better than that, can you? Stray Cat Blues, Prodigal Son, Salt of the Earth. This is arguably when the beginning of the Stones' classic period began. Sort of started with this, ended, depending on your mileage, either with Exile on Main Street or Goat's Head Soup. That's sort of considered to be sort of the Rolling Stones' classic period, when they were sort of considered to be the best band in the world. And again, hard to argue, all wonderful albums. The next album we're going to have a look at is a slightly more controversial album. It's celebrating its 50th anniversary in the month of December. It was originally released on the 7th of December 1973. It is Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes. Now, a lot of people think that this is, you know, Yes went too far with this album. It's a double album, four-sided album, and you have four side-long epics. And people thought it was overblown and indulgent, and you know what? It is, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I will defend at least 3/4 of this album. I think sides 1, 2, and 4 are great. Side 3 has its moments, but is my least favourite side. But, I mean, The Revealing Science of God, side 1, one of my probably top 10 favourite Yes songs. Absolutely adore that. The Remembering is side 2, which I really, really love as well. It's a quieter, more pastoral piece, at least in parts of it. It then gets sort of up and going in the relayer parts, which would prefigure what their next album would be called. Side 3, The Ancient. That's the one that I feel is a little bit, it's noisy, it's cacophonous, it's avant-garde. And if you're into that sort of thing, that's fine. I have no problem with avant-garde music. I love it. I don't know that Yes do it particularly well, but that's just me. It's still the beautiful sort of Leaves of Green part, the last 6 minutes or so of The Ancient, is absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely love that. And then Nous sommes du soleil, Ritual, side 4. Really good. It does have a big long percussion sort of piece in the middle of it, which, you know, you can take or leave. But the song itself is just breathtakingly good. And it really, you know, they go out on a winner there. I'll defend this album. I think it's a great Yes album. Maybe not a perfect Yes album, but a really, really good one. Now, for something that couldn't be less Yes-like, the next album we're going to be having a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of December. It was originally released on the 8th of December 1978. It's a debut album by this artist, and that is Public Image First Issue by Public Image Limited. Now, this album, I think, was a real breakthrough. You've got the wonderful artwork, sort of, you know, looking like Vogue covers and that sort of thing, you know, sort of like, you know, magazine covers for fashion magazines and that sort of thing. But I mean, you've got some wonderful songs on this. This was a real game changer, this album, because this was John Lydon, formerly known as Johnny Rotten. It's the first thing he did after leaving Sex Pistols, after the breakup of Sex Pistols. And this is very, very different from what Sex Pistols were doing. This is post-punk. It's definitely leaving punk behind. It still has the nastiness and the energy and the grit of punk, but it's exploring musically far more than those sort of three-chord ravers that Sex Pistols used to do. And I love Sex Pistols, don't get me wrong. Never Mind the Bollocks is a wonderful album. I probably like this better. It's a little bit more interesting. It goes in different directions. You've got the wonderful theme. You've got Religion 1 and 2, Analysia. You've got the title track, Public Image. That was their first single. What a way to announce yourself to the world. Absolutely wonderful. You've got Low Life, you've got Attack, and then you've got Fodder Stomp, which is a bit of a goof around, a bit of a jam, but it's still in that sort of avant-garde, experimental kind of way that Public Image would go. And they would definitely go even further in that direction with the next couple of albums. It's a wonderful album. If you've never checked out Public Image Limited, especially the first sort of 3 or 4 albums, definitely well worth your time, definitely worth checking out. The next album is also having its 55th anniversary in the month of December. We've had a few of those today. It was originally released on the 11th of December 1968. It's actually the second album by this band, but it is a self-titled album, and that is Blood, Sweat and Tears. Now, their first album was Child is the Father to Man. Didn't really do anything on the charts. The leader of the band at that stage was Al Cooper. He left the band after that. They brought in David Clayton Thomas, a Canadian singer. They became more of a sort of a collective. They did sort of more cover versions, and what they did write was sort of more group written rather than, like, Al Cooper very much dominated that first album as far as the writing credits go. But this is the album that made this band big. This album, like, won Grammy Awards. It did really, really well. It starts off with the sort of really beautiful variations on a theme by Eric Satie, which is sort of like classical music. You'd know that piece of music if you heard it. Do, 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 do. Yeah. Then you've got the wonderful Smiling Phases. You've got Sometimes in Winter. You've got a wonderful version of God Bless the Child, which, of course, I know as a Billie Holiday song. But they do a really lovely version of it. The big, big hit off this album was Spinning Wheel, which David Clayton Thomas wrote. Wonderful song. I mean, also a big hit off this was You Make Me So Very Happy, which is wonderful. You've got Blues Part 2, which is a sort of a big jam, and they do really well. Wonderful horn band. If you're into bands with horn sections, this is definitely an album worth checking out if you don't already know it. I expect a lot of you will know this album because it was a big, big album back in the day. It's a wonderful album and definitely worth checking out. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of December. It was originally released on the 11th of December 1978. It is Well, it's the fourth album by this artist, but it's the second sort of album that got noticed and got a worldwide release, as it were. And that is Equinox by Jean-Michel Jarre. I love Jean-Michel Jarre, especially his sort of stuff from the late 70s and early 80s. Wonderful synthesizer music, but it's not synth pop. It's more sort of, it's not quite ambient, but it is very atmospheric music. Lots of different layers to this music. It's absolutely wonderful. It's divided into 8 parts, but it really, each side kind of plays as a side-long kind of piece. You can kind of tell where each part starts, but they do sort of blend into each other. I won't go through each part because that would be a bit silly, I think, considering what I've just said about it. But it is wonderful music. Jean-Michel Jarre plays all the instruments himself, plays all sorts of synthesizers like ARPs and AKS and Yamaha, you know, Elka, Korg, Oberheim. You know, he uses a bit of Mellotron on this as well. He uses various drum machines. It's a wonderful, if you're looking for something really great and atmospheric and completely keyboard based, this is well worth checking out, along with his sort of earlier stuff like Oxygen, and then the other albums that would come later like Magnetic Fields and Zuluk and Rendezvous. All wonderful, wonderful albums, and definitely worth your time as far as I'm concerned. Wonderful artist. The next album, I'm going to admit, is a little bit of a cheat because it's actually technically a compilation, but I still am going to include this because this album has a very special place for me. It was originally released on the 16th of December 1983, so it's having its 40th anniversary in the month of December, and that is Japanese Whispers by The Cure. This is where I came in as far as The Cure's music came. You know, these singles were what I first heard about The Cure. You know, things like Let's Go to Bed. That's probably the very first Cure song I really was aware of and fell in love with. But I mean, this has also got the Love Cats on it and The Walk, which are all great singles. But you get the B-sides as well, you know, things like Speak My Language and The Upstairs Room and Just One Kiss and The Dream. You know, it's a wonderful album, and I think it stands up in its own right. You know, none of these songs were on any other albums, so it kind of is an album in its own right, even though it is a collection of singles. It's a great Cure album, and it definitely shows the lighter, more playful side of the band, but I still think it's a really great Cure album. And as I say, this was where I first started with The Cure, so it has a very special spot in my heart. And the last album we're going to have a look at is celebrating its 45th anniversary in the month of December. I don't have an exact date for it. It just was released in December of 1978. I feel like it's a bit of an overlooked album in this artist's catalogue, and that is From the Inside by Alice Cooper. As you can see, mine's still got the hype sticker on it, and I have to be very careful when I open the album up because I don't want to ruin it, but it's got that wonderful, you know, opening up sleeve, a bit like Brain Salad Surgery by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which I talked about last week. And it's got like a bit of a one on the back as well, like there's the doors there leading out of the asylum. This is a concept album. It's about Alice being in rehab and that sort of thing. The lyrics are a co-write between Alice Cooper and Bernie Taupin, who of course is best known as the lyricist for Elton John. A lot of various people writing the music with Alice on this album. It's a wonderful album. I mean, it's got the title track, which I think is really great. Wish I Were Born in Beverly Hills, The Quiet Room, Nurse Rosetta, Millie and Billy, you know, Jackknife Johnny, For Veronica's Sake. You know, you get all these different characters that he meets in the rehab centre, which I think is really, really good. The music is produced by David Foster. It definitely has a bit of a sheen to it. It's trying to have a bit of a commercial sound, but I think it works. I think it's a really great album, and the concept is wonderful and works really, really well. I think Alice and Bernie Taupin did a great job on that. So there you have it. Those are my anniversary albums for the month of December 2023. Please let me know in the comments which of these albums you like, maybe which ones you don't care for so much. And of course, please let me know which albums you think I missed that I should have included. I didn't have a long list to choose from this month, so I'll be interested to see what you guys have as far as other albums that have anniversaries in the month of December 2023. Remember, when I'm talking about significant anniversaries, as you will have noticed, I'm talking about anniversaries that end in a 5 or a 0. So please do let me know in the comments any that you think I should have included. Often you come up with things that I wish I'd thought of. So I really appreciate the comments on these videos in particular. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to look at some of my other anniversary album shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my appearances on other people's channels, like the wonderful Rock Daydream Nation, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter, and I now have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Please come and give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.